Welcome to Soundbreaker. On today's episode, we're talking to Drew Thurlow. Did I pronounce it right, by the way? Thurlow.
Sure
Am I
did.
correct?
Yes.
Fantastic. Who is a groundbreaker in the music industry. Thanks for joining us. And for our listeners who might not be familiar with you, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what do you do?
Sure. I am the founder of Opening Ceremony Media, which is a music tech consulting company. I am in the midst of writing a book about music and AI for the UK publisher Routledge, and I advise all different kinds of companies in the music space and entertainment space. I was previously senior vice president of A&R at Sony Music and director of artist partnerships at Pandora. And I also started my career as a session musician, and I was signed to all kinds of labels and publishers, and that's how I kind of informed my journey.
Great. Well, great having you here. Let's dive into it. Can you take us back a bit, if you don't mind? We go a bit about your teenage years, or a little bit even younger than that. How this whole thing, love and passion, through music and music industry, that kind of drove you into this path that you're in right now.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Rhode Island, which
Yes, sir.
only only about 300 or 400 miles from New York City, but it might as well have been on another planet. What was happening in New York, it felt so far away. I loved music, but I never conceived of how the process happened or anything happened. Uh, I studied music in college, and then I moved to Boston. And when I got to Boston, I ended up randomly getting a job with the Red Sox, and I worked in the front office of the Boston Red Sox for a couple of years, and that taught me a
Wow.
really valuable lesson. My other passion in growing up besides music was baseball, and once I got into the front office, I'm like, these aren't special people. These are just people who have a job. I think it was really illuminating that it's
When
not
did you
simply
work
just.
for the Red Sox? Just curious. Not to interrupt your.
I was
When
there
was
during
the?
the good years, '03 to '05,
Oh, okay.
when
Okay.
they won their first World Series. I was on the team plane and everything. I wish social media
Nice.
had existed back then. I would have a lot of content, but it was an extraordinary experience. But I ultimately wanted to be in music, so I moved to New York on a whim, and I got an apartment with a couple of other musician friends, and we started playing in bands. And we played in indie rock bands because that's what you did when you lived in New York in 2005,
Hmm.
and it went pretty well. I My roommates and I had a project that ended up turning into a band called Clap Your Hands Say Yeah, which had quite a great run. I got signed to Atlantic and another band, and I did session work for all different kinds of people. I played in a band with Moby for a while. It's just a really great time. And then
Nice.
after touring a little bit in the recording, I liked it, but I was curious about the business aspect of it. So I took a job at Warner Music Group as an assistant at an imprint called Nonesuch, and
Hmm.
that's kind of how I started working in music.
Good. Did you perform at CBGB in New York
I
back in
have,
the
I
day?
have, I have. I remember I played there once. It was,
Hmm.
I think it was even after they announced the club was closing. It was
Oh,
cool. I'm glad I did it,
like
but
towards the end of it, you're saying it was
yeah,
towards the end.
it wasn't nearly as prestigious as it might have been in the '70s or something. I mean, I've certainly played places like Bowery Ballroom, more than I can remember. That for someone of my generation, that's a lot more special and noteworthy than
Yeah.
CBGB's. But yeah,
Cool. Drew, starting with your early days at Warner Music Group, your role was instrumental in bringing them into the digital era. How did these experiences shape your understanding of the digital music landscape?
yeah, it's funny. The landscape has happened, changed quite a bit. And I
Yes.
remember in 2005 when I got to Warner's, the entire Warner Music Group division had one person rather, working
Wow.
on digital initiatives. One, and this is they had just done a deal with iTunes, so I think they staffed up after that. But at my imprint, there was no one working on the digital aspect, so I was like, I'll do it. Distinctly remember sitting in these commerce meetings with people. Back then it was called sales, and bragging about how they had like upped the price of CDs over the handful of years. And I by this point I'm probably 23 or 24, sitting in a conference room. I'm not that far removed from childhood, and I remember thinking, I used to be able to buy 2 CDs with my lawn mowing money when I was 14.
Hmm.
By the time I was 17, I couldn't afford more than 1 CD. And I'm like, these are the guys why. This is the reason why these guys. And I'm, is there any wonder that there's rampant piracy out there? So it was something I was interested in, but it was also a necessity. So I started working on the digital aspect of the business, and 5 years went by, and it became quite a depressing time to work at a label. By 2010, Spotify had just launched, but by no means had matured. And
But let me ask you, why was it kind of boring for you after working there for 5 years? Going from the physical era to the digital era, which kind of exciting and tough to convince, but then the labels went with it.
it got more exciting, but by 2010, 2011, there was no guarantee that streaming was going to be the savior. And iTunes was responsible for a large, certainly more than half of the reported label's business by that point. But it was
Sure.
not what it was. It was the global workforce had declined by 80%, and even something as simple as like no one had gotten raises in years. And I'd been a musician or working in music by 7, 8 years at that point.
Hmm.
And I was living with 3 people or 4 other people in East Village apartment. And I remember I had a good friend who was a manager who managed a couple of decent bands. And she didn't know any more than me or didn't have any more experience than me, but she was looking at vacation houses, and I'm living month to month. So I was like, well, I just don't see this turning around. So
Got it.
the two options for an exciting digital music landscape at that point were Spotify, which had just launched in the U.S., and Pandora, which had been a company for about 4 years, but hadn't quite reached the scale that it came to. And Spotify wasn't having it, but Pandora was. And I got to Pandora. I was the first music hire at the company, and that was an extraordinary 6 years there.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, let's talk about Pandora. Moving to Pandora, you played a key role in transforming the services from ad supported radio to DSP. What were the major challenges in such complex structure?
Yeah, so when I joined, it was a bigger startup, but it was still kind of a startup, a couple hundred people, and the service had grown, but they weren't really working with the music industry because they had a statutory license to play music in a radio
Hmm.
function. And when you do that, there's really no reason to talk to the industry. So the company was basically split. Half of them were engineers and product tech people, and half were ad sales people selling ad inventory against the listenership. I was brought in because these advertisers were starting to spend a ton of money on the platform. And when you do that, you want custom stuff. So they were started to ask to work with artists in a custom way, whether that be experiential in concerts or whether that be content. So I was brought in to ideate, build, book, and program custom brand funded things for artists.
Hmm.
So it started that, and that was a big part of what I did throughout my time there. I probably bought for about 150 events, everything from massive partnerships at South by where we took over a block to paying Imagine Dragons gobs of money to play a Super Bowl event for Bud Light or whoever it was, to a small local cable company wanted a local rock band to play, and everything in between. We did a ton of content, and at some point, Pandora needed to evolve, especially as on-demand streaming grew. By that point, the music team was about 40 people. I had started as the first. I wasn't running the team at that point, but I had been the first. And
Hmm.
so we made a bunch of acquisitions to try to compete with Spotify. By 2014, 2015, Apple Music and Amazon Music had launched in the U.S. So we were starting to lose users. So we acquired Ticketfly, tried to create a ticket platform. We acquired RDO to launch an
To
on-demand
bring more
service.
traffic to the platform.
Right. But what happened
Hmm.
was, Pandora, tough business. Like DSPs and streaming is a tough business. You know, more than half of your revenue has to go right out the door to rights holders, and of course, it's
Correct.
important. It's important to compensate rights holders, but that doesn't leave the company very much left over for engineering talent. So we acquired RDO. By the time we got RDO up and running as a standalone DSP on-demand service for Pandora, 2 years had gone by. It was 2016, and by then, it was people had moved on into Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. So um, Pandora was acquired by SiriusXM around that time. it's shockingly still a big business. I mean, they still have 40 million users a month in the US. That is not nothing. And the ad market
Pandora.
goes, yeah,
Hmm.
to this day,
Wow.
to 2024. And it's still a good business, but it's not what it was, and it certainly doesn't kind of drive the cultural conversation at all. So, at this point, it's a nice annuity for SiriusXM.
Interesting. Um, at Sony Music Entertainment, you manage to secure numbers Grammy nominations and wins under your leadership. Can you share insights into the A&R strategies that led those remarkable achievements?
Sure. Yeah. In 2017, I went to Sony Music. They had an imprint called Masterworks.
Yeah.
Historically, it had been a kind of classical jazz imprint, but by 2017, the frontline labels, RCA, Columbia, Epic, and then soon to be launched Arista, which hadn't launched yet.
Yeah.
They were.
I don't want to interrupt you, but one thing,
Yeah.
what made you, because you worked, at a conglomerate like, Warner Music Group.
Right.
So what made you go back to the same, like, okay, from a DSP or from a streaming platform, more of a music tech side, back to another conglomerate, Sony, Sony Music Entertainment, which holds different, you know, aspects of the music industry.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't know. I mean, streaming had been a very lucrative boon to the recorded music industry, and times were good again. And I really missed working directly with artists that I cared about. When I was at Pandora, I mean, I worked with I was all things to all people.
Yes.
I probably booked the most significant like South by Hip Hop showcases from 2012 to 2016, and I was doing all kinds of content. But I missed working directly with artists, and I missed A&Ring, and I missed recording, and the labels are healthy again. So I'm like, all right, let's run it back. Let's run it back to where I was, what I was doing pre Pandora, but in a healthy environment. For a large part of my time at Sony, that's what it was. And the imprint I was doing, I was given kind of a leash to do anything that I thought was commercially viable. And I'm on the board of the Americana Music Association. I really like songwriters, and that community matters to me. I wanted to work with those artists, and I wanted to work with interesting electronic music that wasn't, say, Calvin Harris. And we did a ton of film and TV scores, and we still had the jazz division, and there was a classical division in Europe that we kind of did the U.S. arm for, and it was a kind of creative and interesting time. And then I started a gaming division to do gaming soundtracks, and then ended up doing
at Sony.
Yeah, I ended up doing some gaming music supervision. It was really cool, but after 5-6 years, I tend to stay in the same place for 5 to 6 years. It's kind of my thing, I guess, and it's not intentional. But after 5 to 6 years at Sony, I really missed working at an innovative place.
But I mean, listen, at Sony, you managed to secure numerous Grammy nominations for a lot of artists. So you must have some kind of A&R strategy that led to this kind of remarkable achievements.
Well,
what kind of strategies you had, like you said, hey, this is what gonna help to get these artists to that level? Or
right. Well, my philosophy is I want to work with music that I've never heard before, and I think when you work with artists that are doing something truly unique and special, then that's when that artist can be someone's favorite artist. And that's where you're going to get those accolades. I mean, labels these days and streaming these days is a volume business. I don't know how many Grammy nominations my artist had at the time I was there, probably 20 to 30, but that's just a function of being a major label.
I know you mentioned Calvin Harris and others. Would you mind sharing with our listeners?
Sure. No, I mean, I didn't work directly with Calvin Harris. I think I did in one project, but he was signed to Columbia. Most of the nominations that I received for my artists were in alternative genres. A lot of film and TV scores. I think the IP I worked with got 4 Academy Award nominations for Best Score for Visual Media. A lot of Grammys in the Best Score for Visual Media. Some producer credits. A couple in the couple years before I left, there was a new gaming category, so a couple in the gaming category. So I was working in the kind of left of center genres, and there's not many major labels or major label imprints working in those genres. So just by sheer numbers, you're going to garner a bunch of those Grammy nominations. So I don't know how many wins I had. I didn't have a very good win rate. I don't know. Just how it
Well,
goes.
you had enough, my friend, to get you all these accolades that you collected throughout the years. Let's talk about Open Ceremony Media, your own company.
Right.
It's a consulting company helping startups and entertainment companies. What services do you offer, and just tell us more about Ceremony Media or
Right. Yeah.
Opening
So
Ceremony Media. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I left Sony about a year. It was January 23. So by this taping, it was 13 months ago, and I really wasn't sure what I was going to be doing, but I'm very, very interested in the music tech landscape, and I kind of missed working in that environment when I was at Pandora. So I'm doing a lot of writing. I just signed a book deal with the UK publisher Routledge to write a book called "Signal and the Noise: Harmonizing Music
congratulations.
and the AI Revolution." Thank you.
Hmm.
It will come out whenever I finish writing it. I don't know when that will be, but I'm also writing for Billboard. I'm writing a music tech, music AI series for Billboard that will come out in March of 24,
Hmm.
and I'm advising a lot of music tech startups, and it's a really interesting time in the music tech startup space. There's never been more music tech startups than ever before. That is
Correct.
because that's because there's been so many mid-level music and entertainment executives out of work. I mean, it's been a terrible time for layoffs, and you have a lot of kind of talented, experienced career people who can't find work, and there's still a little bit of a hangover from the low interest rate funding era. So there's some money out there, coupled with
Hmm.
the fact that cloud storage costs and developer talent have never been cheaper. It's really easy to kind of have an idea and then realize that idea. So it's a very fertile ground right now, and it's interesting to see the patterns in the music tech landscape. Who's
Hmm.
getting funding. What problems are attracting a lot of startups. So it's a really interesting space right now.
It is. Um, okay. With your extensive background, you witness firsthand the implication of AI on the music, ecosystem. How do you envision ethical growth, especially for platforms and creators?
Yeah, that's a really good and big question. I think one of the reasons why I started thinking and writing and talking about AI so much is because there's so much news, there's so much development, and it's hard to follow. Even someone like me who follows this stuff as closely as one can, I still miss stuff. But I want to share the industry and our community that this AI revolution can be a very positive and growth area for both creators and on the business side, as long as we manage it and its growth properly. And there are some really great tools out there that can help anyone, whether you're a musician or you're working in the business, that can help you and make your lives easier. And it's not additive, and that's one of the it's additive and not replacing. And I think it's one of the things that, at least in this early days, the industry has coalesced around. Investors have coalesced around. No one is interested in tech that's going to replace a person. You're interested in tech that's going to be additive to the process. And I think that is what we're going to see these tractions companies gain traction that are doing that. And I think it's going to be really helpful and clear up some of the annoying, tedious parts of our jobs.
For someone like you who've been through different platforms in music industry transitions, whether it's physical to digital, and you worked hand in hand in a lot of these places. So obviously, you develop a little bit of a, I would say, sixth sense where you know what's next because nobody ever imagined. I wouldn't say radio disappeared. Radio is still important. A lot of the major labels, but not as important as it used to be. Without it, you're dead back in the day.
Right.
So, what's next, you think, with all the technology, with all the fast moving, the pace that we're going through right now, generative AI, this tools AI replacing this? I mean, everybody have their own analogy. Everybody, I do a lot of interviews and, I ask some of these questions just for me, I want to know personally. Like, I'm curious. Like, what if anybody has a? I wouldn't say anybody has a crystal ball, but some kind of an answer. Like, okay, I could see that happening because nothing
Yeah,
stays. Everybody there base their answers on what do we have now, and but nobody says no. I would say 2 years from now or 3 years, this is going to be gone. This is what's going to replace it. This is what's going to happen. Some kind of. What's your opinion? What's your take? Like, what's next in the
yeah.
music business?
Great
And my
question.
next question is, what's missing beside what's next? So let's focus on that one
Yeah.
first.
Okay. Well, what's missing? I think what's missing is nothing and everything at the same time.
Hmm.
And and I think I can answer that question based on what tools are starting to develop.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to look back and think about what's missing in this era. I think the ability for a music fan who is not a music studier or instrument player or knows theory or played an instrument. I think that person is going to be able to make credible music in the future. Actually, they can now. And I think that one of the massive shifts we're going to see is the sheer amount of music people are going to be making. And that is going to have major implications for creators. There's a really smart music industry professor at Northeastern University
Hmm.
uh, named Frank Woodworth that I work with. And he estimates that there's about 1.8 million artists in the world, and these aren't all people supporting themselves full time, but they're people who at least know how to use a DAW, and they've created music competently and seriously, and they've probably spent some
Hmm.
resources to record and tour or something. And that number is about to be hundreds of millions. And I call it the Instagramming of music, where some of these generative AI or creator tools that you're going to be able to, like with text prompts, feeding it video or audio or feeding it images, is going to be able to create kind of cool music that you
Hmm.
might like yourself. So that has major implications on creators. There's just going to be a lot more music out there, and that's on the heels of more music now than ever before. Now, there also has major implications on the business.
Yes.
It's pretty clear that like no one's going to want to listen to this music. We already have too much music in the world. Audible Magic, a content moderation company, estimates there's about 220 million songs have been commercially released in the West and North America.
Hasn't been commercially released.
Like in the history of
Wow.
recorded music, in the history of Western recorded music, about 200. It's hard to even say, but it's somewhere between 200, 220
Would you
million.
think that the gaming, I mean, industry has a lot to do also with the music, but would you think that something could be all in one together?
Well, gaming is certainly a place where a lot of audio is needed, but
Correct.
I think the point is that this music is going to be, as I said, the Instagramming of music. Not very few of us are professional photographers and even know what aperture is, but we all love our TikTok and our Instagram feeds, and we post there often. I think there's going to be a real distinction between music as a lifestyle accessory or music as a hobby and music as art. And it's pretty clear that the distributors can't take all this music and that the DSPs can't afford to host all this music. So I think you're going to start to see a real distinction between people who are making music for their family or for fun or for their TikTok videos. These are people who are not trained as musicians, but they have these kind of gamified generative AI tools to do it. And then you have real artists who are making music for passive and active listening, who are playing concerts, who have fans, and this is the music you're going to be able to listen to on Spotify, and this is the music that's going to be commercialized. So the
Got it.
implications for the industry is like, how do you serve the first class? How do you serve the hobbyist creators with creator tools, different kinds of filters and different kinds of effects and different kinds of platforms for people to host and talk about music and different kinds of platforms. So, up until now, the history of the music industry has been about monetizing the output of the process. The
Hmm.
song is what's valuable. The writing and the recording piece of that is a sunk cost, so you can get to the song and then you can monetize the song. Well, then the new music industry is going to be about monetizing the process because the song's not going to be valuable. So I think some of the startups in that space are very interesting, and I think those are the ones that are attracting companies.
Monetizing the process. Very interesting, Drew. Huh.
Yeah. That's a huge pattern. It's hard to predict what's going to happen because the only rule about that is that if you do that, you know you're going to be wrong. But it's
So
pretty
that will
interesting.
change then the role of the DSPs in a way. I mean, it's not going to continue forever. You got to have to pay for your music and memberships upon memberships. You know.
Yeah, I see hosting fees. I mean, one of the big distributors who I work with, who I won't mention, has told me that they're losing money on the amount of content people are uploading to their portal, but not actually pushing it live. And if you
Hmm.
ever use one of these big distributors, like, you know, you fill out the metadata and you upload your WAV file and you upload your cover art, and then you press send and it goes through a content moderation process, and it either gets stuck or there's something wrong with it, or you don't finish uploading it. One of the major distributors is like, you know, we have so much music and content sitting in our portal that's not being monetized, and like they're just, it's not a business that can continue like that. So we're going to have a distinction between kind of art and entertainment music and hobby music.
Hmm. Got it. Hmm. Uh, well, you had an incredible journey so far. The music industry is known for its challenges and setbacks. Can you share a difficult moment you faced in your career and how did you overcome it?
So many. I, I, yeah, I mean,
Inspire our viewers. Inspire. This is always inspiring for our
yeah, I
listeners
mean,
and viewers at Soundbreaker.
yeah, I mean, I have I have a nice and I have a tidy resume and I have a tidy career path, but as
Yeah,
anyone knows, that is not how it unfolds. It's not. I can't say that I had some kind of grand plan, but it's worked out so far. I will say that it's incredibly challenging to continue to stay relevant in this business, and things move so quickly and culture moves so quickly.
it
And
does.
I,
It
I will tell
does.
you, there was a time where, you know, when I was working at Nonesuch, the Warner imprint, I worked with some of the most popular music that was in the U.S. I worked with David Byrne. I worked with Wilco when they were headlining Lollapalooza, a rock band in Chicago. We signed the Black Keys earlier in their career. They had #2 and then #1 Billboard charting album when I worked there. I worked with some really, you know, heritage songwriters like Emmylou Harris and Katie Lang when they were, you know, kind of at the top of their game and, you know, charting.
Hmm.
You know, I went to Pandora and I started working with all different kinds of music. And 3 years later, you couldn't find a guitar on the charts.
Wow.
It's all hip hop and R&B, and the kind of music that I came up with, the kind of music that I really love, and, you know, being on the board of the American Music Association, the kind of songwriter-driven music that I really care about is really, it's commercially in the basement. That's been really
Yeah.
tough for me to accept and to really kind of find ways to integrate that music into my workflow while still staying relevant. And it's, you know, this is not, doesn't mean that this music doesn't have value. Doesn't mean it's not commercially valuable. It doesn't mean that people out there shouldn't make it. But it's been a real kind of eye-opening shift in culture very quickly. And I will also say for
Interesting.
people, you know, people looking for jobs right now, it's just been a terrible environment. And I feel, you know, you see a lot of the posts on LinkedIn about I can't find a job, I got to move into my parents' house. And the thing that I want to say about that is that, you know, there's a wave coming. And I was too young when the internet started. I was just a kid, but obviously you could see the internet led to this $1 trillion economy. And when I was
What is the wave? You said there's a wave
the
coming.
wave, yeah, the wave is this AI, and it almost reminds me a little bit of the way smartphones started to proliferate in 8, 9, 10, where all of a sudden there were these new markets opening up with the smartphones being in everyone's pocket. This wave, I think, is coming. So many of these companies are starting to get funding and mature, and it's going to open up a whole new market for people. And they're going to need traditional music industry people. They're going to need biz dev people. They're going to need marketing people. They're going to need entry level people. So the people out there looking for work who have been laid off or underemployed, just hold on, because there is a massive new economy coming around these tech advancements, and it's, you know, I can see it coming. So I just wanted to give some optimism in what's been a really tough year for the tech and entertainment industries.
Well, you heard it first on Soundbreaker.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A new
I just
wave
hope I'm
of
right.
positivity. A new wave of, yes, absolutely. We need something to revive the music industry, and it is coming. I mean, a good point there, Drew. Really, a good point. Very interesting. You know, I would say I agree with you on it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I hope I'm right. It's just there's so much innovation happening, and it's actually like incredibly exciting. And
Yes.
especially now that streaming is starting to slow, the growth of streaming is slowing down. I think the labels are, especially the major labels, are a little uncertain onto what the next decade's going to look like. So I think this is going to stabilize the industry a bit, and we won't have to revisit the file sharing era of the past.
And it's going to be a new era of AI. New jobs, a lot of
Yeah,
jobs probably created.
right.
Let's see what AI going to do on its own. What are people going to do with AI, using the tools that going to help them advance and get the artists faster out there and in marketing and everything in
Right.
creation. Um, your opinion is obviously very inspiring and very motivating, very positive towards the music industry, which needed. What is some of the common misconceptions people have about the music industry, Drew?
I think people who don't work in the music industry think it's glamour all the time. It is not. Although I think people probably feel that way about tech more than music at this point. One of the things I've learned about the last 20 years is that I think the music industry of the 80s and 90s, which I missed, sounded like a really great time.
It was.
But
It was. I remember those days.
yeah,
It was. It
but
was. 100%. Yes. It's a
but I
different
think
era. You
yeah,
know.
I think like what I noticed when I started working in music was that people really cared, and I'm not sure
Yeah.
that people cared as much in the 80s or 90s. I think the industry attracted a lot of people for the party and the glamour and the working with artists, and pay isn't particularly great in most of the music industry, and jobs are hard, and work life balance is tough. But I think it's attracted people who are in it for the right reasons. And I think that if you work for a label now or you're working in management, you love music. And if you really care about being rich, then you're going to go work in tech or something. So I think that's been a really kind of a good byproduct of the industry correcting itself. Um, but I think that the misconception people have with the music industry going forward is that it really is like a tech industry now. Even I took a lot of conversations with Warner Music Group. I've never met so many ML engineers at a label before. Like they have really transformed their music group into a tech media company that happens to traffic in music. And Sony and Universal are a little not quite there, but they're getting there too. So I think the skill sets that people are employing now are like a lot of data analysts and a lot of coders and engineers and a lot of product people. I think that's what the music industry is now.
So you're saying less in the creative side, more on the tech side.
As artists have been able to kind of create and record on their own without the resources and expertise of a company, then yeah, I think it's a lot more about um, managing how media and audiences consume music these days, and that's increasingly through tech functions.
Hmm. Um, let's dive into collaboration. Collaboration is often a key element in the music world. Could you share? I'm sure you have a lot of those stories. Can you share a memorable collaboration story with someone or someone kind of you worked with and left an impact on you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have so many. Um, One of the most kind of satisfying things I did when I was doing A&R was connecting artists and having artists collaborate, whether it be as simple as a remix or
Hmm.
kind of a writer producer relationship. And it's really nice when one of the things that I really cared about was making music that I think people could love. And when you make decisions and make introductions and it yields a piece of music that people love, then that's really really important. At least that was what my incentive was to continue to do it.
Hmm.
Um, But I would also, I want to give a shout out to the advertising and brand communities too. When I was at Pandora, one of the things I'm most proud of is taking brand money and funneling it to artists' pockets, whether that be through fees from talent buying to producing and sponsoring content to just advertising on Pandora so the service could keep growing and return royalties. I think the artist and the brand community is gotten very sophisticated at working with artists in a way that they weren't in previous generations. And working with brands I found to be like lovely. Not only did they have the money that the industry didn't have, but they were by and large like very careful about working with artists and made sure the partnerships were elegant and added to the whole process. So I have a million examples of working with a brand director or a brand somewhere and having real conversations about art and how they could support it and how they could, give their clients something that was interesting and innovative. And I have many, many, many of those.
Drew, in your line of work, how do you keep yourself updated to the latest trends, innovations, or changes in the industry? And how important is to continue to learn?
Yeah, it's always a balance between learning as much as you can, but also ignoring the
Yes.
noise.
Hmm.
I'm really grateful for the last year because I've been able to learn and immerse myself in the startup AI world in a way that I couldn't when I was had my head down just doing A&R at a label. And it's led to some really extraordinary things like writing for Billboard and my book deal. But the resources are out there. There's no barrier to information anymore. There's a ton of great podcasts like this one, Soundbreakers. There's a ton
Thank
of
you.
there's a ton of great. I mean, I just listened to the one that you posted the other day.
With who?
I forgot his name, but he was a old music tech expert. The one you just the latest. Maybe it's not the latest one, but and he had been working in music tech his own whole career. He worked for one of the early companies putting music on the internet, and now he works for a company that advocates for and advises music tech startups on product and business development lines. His name Mark.
Oh, Mark,
Yeah.
the guy that we posted yesterday? No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, he's great.
And
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
I've never come across him. Despite the fact that we've traveled in the same circles, I've never come across him. I learned a ton listening to that article. I didn't know about as much about the early days of digital music because I was a kid, but
Yes.
really smart guy. And I think anyone who is interested in music tech should listen to not only this episode but that episode. And there's some great resources out there. Music Tech UK and of course Billboard has a really vibrant writers who write about this and music business worldwide. And
Yeah.
there's no shortage of people writing on some of the newsletters about this stuff. So there's no barrier to information anymore. So it's out there.
No. And hey, Soundbreaker's here to bring all that information to everybody. That's what we do. We really, I mean, when we pick people to interview, we try to we stay in the same arena of the music, but we bring the tech aspect of it, the music, the creativity, and how is it changing, how is it evolving, and what's new. To kind of help a lot of the people who been in the business and people who starting in the business. It doesn't matter where you are and how old you are. Just the whole idea is kind of, information is everything. And by having you and having all the, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was going to give you a shout out. You're doing the Music AI. I don't know when this episode's going to drop, but you're doing the Music AI roundtable with
Yeah, Summit. That's going to be
Summit.
March 8th. Yes, in
Yeah.
the first day. That's going to be next Friday. Yes, South by Southwest, but we're doing it virtually.
Okay.
And we're going to have some amazing talent on the panels. I'm sure you've seen some of them, or you've seen the,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
know. I know them. I'm dying. Dr. Maya Ackerman. I know well.
yes,
She's been working on this stuff for 8 years now, and an
yes,
incredibly talented researcher and entrepreneur in the space. And
yes.
I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely, Brian Zisick. We're gonna have also Jessica, owner and founder and CEO of Audio Shake.
Right.
David Fritz, a big New York entertainment attorney. who also have his own platform. Who else? We have David Hinkin, a writer, contributor, and an author for what is it, Forbes magazine. So
Mhm.
yes, the listed panelists, and definitely a great team we're going to have.
Right.
Good. Can't wait to have you on. Listen, I mean, you've been around the business for a long time. You gained a lot of, how should I say, knowledge. I would like you to share some of the tips and helpful knowledge and tips for people who, after watching this episode, for our listeners and viewers, and say, hey, you know what? I love what Drew did, and I want to take that path. Okay, the whole thing changes, no longer the same, but the mentality, the road, the path, the kind of vision is still the same. The game might change, but the rules still the same in a way. And I would say, so what tips, advice you would have for people who starting out in the business, who wants to get involved, despite all the how should I say, the gatekeeping that still exists, unfortunately, in our music business?
Yeah. I'll give the advice that I got, which was incredibly present and still relevant to almost any industry. The entertainment and music in particular is very competitive. It's a really
Yes,
tough industry to break into. It is not enough to just love music. I try to do a lot of mentoring, and I teach at I guest lecture at NYU, and I said Northeastern and NYU New School and some others. And I meet a lot of kids who just I love music, so I want to work in music. Well, that's not enough. You really need to make your own opportunities. For me, that was
correct.
playing music. I was in bands. When I wasn't playing in shows, I would out at shows. I was throwing parties and promoting shows on my own for fun. And I built some cool things. And then after a while, someone in a position of authority saw it and recognized the value and gave me an opportunity. The same thing is true now. You need to make your own opportunity. That's different for every person depending on your skill sets and your interest. You might start a music review feed on TikTok. Maybe you want to start writing about music for a blog or something, or offering to write for a publication for free. Maybe you come across a deep electronic artist on the internet that you fall in love with and you offer to manage them. But you really got to get make your own opportunity and start your own thing. And then if you build something cool and learn, then someone in a position of authority will come along and recognize the value and give you an opportunity. That's kind of been true for almost any scenario, unless you happen to have nepotism factor, which unfortunately is
Yes.
alive and well in every industry, including the music industry. But if you're not the son or daughter of a Lucian Grange or something, then maybe you need to start your own, make your own opportunities.
Interesting. So, any tip, anything that you're working on, that you'd like to advertise, mention that it's coming in the next month or so this year? Please
Yeah,
share anything
yeah.
you're working on.
I'm writing a series for Billboard, as I mentioned, on the music tech landscape. A
You
lot of
did.
AI in that, so I'd love people to check that out. I'm writing a book about music and AI, as I said as well. I've never written a book before. It's a little intimidating. Anyone of your listeners out there who has written a book or is working in the AI or music tech space, I would love to hear from you, because I could use all the crowdsourcing help I could get and any tips I could get. So um, the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn, Drew Thurlow on LinkedIn, and send me a message. I'm pretty active on the platform, and I'd love to any help on how to tackle this project.
Yes, you heard it. If you want to reach Drew Thurlow at LinkedIn, he's always active and available, and he's willing to advise, help, and to work with. Is that good?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I also advise companies on they're all different kinds of things. One of my clients is the NHL. It's not AI, but I do advise them on their music content and the entertainment content strategy. So, um, and anyone that needs some advice on either music tech or licensing or working with artists, then I am here.
Wow. Well, I have to say, another great, interesting, and fun interview, Drew. Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you for joining us today. Thank you. I appreciate your time. And this concludes today's episode of Soundbreaker. Please make sure to follow us on socials and stay tuned for new episodes. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
My pleasure, my friend. It was good having you.
Oh, yeah, that was really fun.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share the Soundbreaker podcast. And if you are joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.